Hey, how's it? Hey, how's it going? If you're watching this, it's likely because you saw this graphic here on LinkedIn talking about the different product development methodologies and how they don't work for AI and machine learning services. Typically speaking, at least that's been my experience. I want to take the opportunity in this video to talk a little bit more about that and the different concepts and where I've seen them fall short, at least in my experience in my career. I also want to take an opportunity to talk about the different principles that I think you want to follow as you do build new AI and ML services. And then lastly, I'll touch on the mechanism, the AI design sprint that brings that together and how we try to practice it at my organization and how I try to do it for my new products and my new services. So before all that, I want to provide a little bit of context and why I think this is important. So if you're here, I don't have to convince you that AI and machine learning is a big deal. I mean, I think we can all say that the economic, the political, the societal impact that AI is going to have is absolutely going to be enormous. We're starting to see early percolations of that in some early adopters, but that is just a sign of things to come. And to the extent that we can help more companies, more of the broader society participate in that, that's going to be the better for everyone. And it's going to be better for us AI practitioners because it's going to allow us to make AI work for a greater number of people. So right now, as I see it, you have this small sliver of early adopters that are doing amazing things with AI. The companies that come to mind are Amazon, Microsoft, Tesla, etc. And they are absolutely just doing great things with AI and machine learning. But then there's everyone else here. And so you have this giant chasm here of how do you get these traditional companies to be more AI powered, to be more like Tesla? How do you help companies like Ford, GM, Chrysler, these traditional companies that have not been digital first, not AI driven, become more data driven and more AI driven? And in my career, that's in part what I've done. So I started my career in the financial services sector, developing quantitative investment strategies for a financial services firm. I then joined the tech startup scene. I joined a startup that was at the intersection of AI and IoT, eventually became a unicorn, one of the fastest growing startups in the US. And since then, I've started my own company, Big Plasma AI, to help companies develop new AI and machine learning services, particularly for IoT. That's where we specialize. But I've been a part of these efforts where we've worked with fairly large S&P 500 companies and trying to get them to be more like Tesla. And I've had some hard lessons learned, and it hasn't been pleasant. It's actually really hard. But here I'm hoping to share some of the tidbits that I've learned in my career. So here's the context. I think that as AI innovators, so if you're watching this video, you're an AI innovator, we're trying to help companies go from here to here. And I like this because it also shows you how difficult the problem is. This is not going to be an easy thing to do. So if you're running into frustrations and then this is hard for you, that's okay. That's okay. This is called the chasm. If you're familiar with technologists speak, the chasm, and it's hard to cross the chasm. That's okay. What we want to do is we want to increase the likelihood of you being able to do that for you, your organizations, and your clients. So that's the context, okay? So second point here is, all right, so if we want to help companies go from here to here, what's the best way to do that? Now, in my career, I've seen all of these. So this is Waterfall, Agile, design thinking. And if you can't see this that well, don't worry. I'm going to put together an image, a PDF, and I'll make it available somewhere down in the page, so go check that out. Waterfall, I've seen that. There's still, I'd say 50% of my clients and 50% of the clients that I've seen in the space at least are still doing some form of waterfall. So this long, drawn out process that's all very systematic and step by step. And I still see a lot of clients trying to do that. And part of the reason why this doesn't work well for AI is because in part AI is trying to solve a particular customer pain point, and if you wait too long to get a really good signal on that, then you're going to waste a lot of R&D time in the waterfall method before you get to that point. So I also find it sort of kind of boring, to be perfectly frank. As a technologist, as an AI specialist, as a data scientist, I like rapid iteration, rapid testing. That to me is the truest form of signal. So I just don't, when I see waterfall, I think like, oh, okay, this is going to be kind of a tougher problem. Agile improves on that. Of course, Agile is this, 2-4 week process where you're constantly evaluating what needs to be worked on and how much effort it's going to take, and you crank it out and you kind of repeat the cycle again and again. So it's a lot more faster paced. The issue that I've found with Agile is I feel like it's good when you have product market fit pretty well identified. So if you have an AI service and you know what it's going to do, what exactly it's going to do for your customers, and it's just a matter of making it better, it's just a matter of maintenance, I really like Agile for that. But that's assuming you know your true north and you know the market value of your AI services. Oftentimes for new AI services, you don't know that. You don't know if you have the right customer. You don't know if you have the right problem that you're solving. You don't know if you have the right solution. And you don't know if AI or machine learning is even the right approach for that. So I think, this is good if you're optimizing something, but for new product development, Agile is just not, it doesn't work well for me. It's almost that contrast between being effective and efficient. If you want to be efficient, Agile is really the good way to go, but you can't be both effective and efficient. You can't do it both at the same time. You want to be effective for new AI and machine learning services, and so for that, I don't think Agile is going to be a good fit. Now, the third option here is design thinking. That's getting us closer to being closer to the client and testing and keeping it lightweight. What I found with design thinking is that it tends to be a little bit too woo-woo for a lot of technical people. So I've worked with design thinking folks, PMs, that come in and say, hey, we're going to do design thinking. And my machine learning engineers, my data scientists are like, okay, we don't really get it. This is a little bit fluffy. There's not a lot of technical meat on it. And I think sometimes it's a little bit of turnoff for the more technical people. I think for the business folks, it tends to be a little bit too long. And you kind of come in, we're going to do a design thinking transformation process that's going to take 9 months, and we're going to study our client for 6 months, and then we're going to find out what they need, and then we're going to build it. It does not go over too well from that perspective, from both the business side of it and also the more technical side. That's at least been my experience, but feel free to push back on that. So I think, again, we're trying to help companies innovate here. You have these traditional methods that are being given to us as product managers, product creators, innovators. I don't think these work. If you're trying to do this more effectively, which is what you're aiming for, you're trying to be more effective, I think you need some new principles. You need some new guidance. So design thinking gets us off to a good place, but on top of design thinking, I would add a couple of different nuances. And this is what I'm calling the new principles of product for AI and ML product service development. Number one is a minimum viable model. So you should have the idea that any additional increase in complexity in your solution should be associated with a significant cost, and so therefore should be associated with a significant gain. So you should always try to solve it in the simplest type of way. So for example, in some of my projects, we're solving for predictive failure types of problems. You can do that with the neural nets, you can do that with the regression, you can do that with the supervised learning approach, you can do that with an unsupervised learning approach. Those are all somewhat complex ways of doing it. A simplest way to do it is rules-based. Okay, if these two metrics go up, then fail. Call it failure. I would start there. I would start there from the very basic line and then build up from there. That's kind of what we're driving at with the minimum viable model, because you want to crank out your service as fast as possible. You want to minimize the overall feasibility risk downstream. You probably want more explainability because you're trying to explain the concept to different stakeholders. So for all those reasons, you want to have the least complex solution as you're building AI and machine learning services. Concept number 2, or principle number 2, is market risk focus. So I'd say that as data scientists and as AI innovators, we always want to start with the fundamental problem that the customer or the end user is trying to solve for, and start there. Don't start with the data. Don't start with what you can train an algorithm on. Don't start with what you think would be a really fancy, cool GitHub portfolio project that you can share. Start with what are the customer's pain points, and then find out what data you can bring to the table, what algorithms you can use to solve that pain point. And I say that because I've been burned many times here. We've developed really super complicated technologies only to find out that it really wasn't what the customer wanted. I'll give you an example. For one of my clients, we developed a super sophisticated predictive maintenance solution, and it was predicting when things were going to fail, when the probability of something failing, different categories. And then we ended up building it and showing it to the client, and all the client wanted was the digital pause that there. All the client wanted was a digital dashboard of some of the key metrics from the machine. They didn't care about any of the AI or machine learning. They just wanted their process digitized. So had we found that out earlier, it would have saved us a bulk of time, energy, and R&D. So that's concept number 2, is to start with the market risk. That's your number 1 risk as you're going into this process that you want to try to solve for. Number 3 here is dual track prototyping. So at the end of your process, you want 2 different types of prototypes. You want a prototype that is more user-centric, that is going to show the user the insights and the AI that you're trying to serve up in the context of their regular workflow. So if you're working with a service technician, then your AI should be embedded into whatever their workflow is going to look like for that particular day. We were recently working with a cybersecurity company, and we mapped out the entire process of their technicians, of their service people, and actually embedded the AI and insights and the data in that process, in that workflow, to see whether or not our hypothesis that this AI would be helpful to them was actually correct. And so I think that's the first prototype that you actually have to do, and that kind of addresses market risk here, that second point that I mentioned. The second prototype that you want here is a functional prototype. So this is getting at feasibility risk. So oftentimes we think that we can do a deep learning neural net model to solve any problem. And that's oftentimes not the case. You oftentimes don't have the right data. The algorithm isn't good enough. You don't have the compute to do it. It's too expensive to train. You may not be able to deploy it. There's a whole host of things that can happen that go from your notebook to actually running it in production. And so we always try to do a second type of prototype, which is a functional prototype. This the favorite way for me to do this is a lightweight web app. So you have Shiny. That's a really good framework for doing these things. But essentially, you're replicating all of the work that's going on in the back end, the data collection, the data wrangling, the serving up of the insights from the model and processing that, and serving it up via an API. So you're replicating a lot of the steps from the back end. You're doing it in a lightweight process, but the idea is to make sure that you can actually do it as a data scientist, and so that you can show your product manager, your PM, your stakeholders that you can actually do it. That just builds a ton of confidence, and I can't tell you how important that is. It's really important. If you're a data scientist, you know, even if your product manager is nodding, yeah, I get it. Don't take their word for them. don't take their word for it. Make sure you show them and they can actually see it, and you can actually demonstrate to them what you're trying to build. That's going to go a long way in them feeling confident in your overall service. The fourth principle here is fast track collab. So the best way to talk about this or think about this is that this idea that domain expertise is very important in the data science realm. I think it's 80% of the game oftentimes is you trying to extract the knowledge from that financial analyst, that cybersecurity expert, that service person that handles the inbound calls. There's a lot of this. And that is oftentimes very challenging in the data science process. It oftentimes feels like an interrogation, quite frankly. Hey, you're talking to the service person like, did you or did you not log that in? Or why did you do this? And like the service person's like, I don't know. Like that happened like 2 years ago. I don't know why we did that. So you want a way to facilitate this in a manner that's not too painful. I call that fast track collaboration, but essentially what it is it's finely engineered workshops that are designed to extract the maximum amount of information from the domain experts and to also facilitate that across all the other domain experts so that we as data scientists can appreciate that, understand that, and embed that into our AI and machine learning service. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the actual details of the AI design sprint. So those are the 4 principles that we want to keep in mind as we're going into new AI and machine learning product development and services. Okay, the last one here, and I'll come out of frame a little bit so that you can see this. And again, I'm going to provide a PDF of this image so you're not straining your eyes in this video. And I apologize for that, but it's hard to kind of get all of this in one screen. But I would say, okay, so that brings us to the AI design sprint. How do we practice it? What are some of the components? What does the schedule look like? So let me walk you through that. Okay, so first I would say is that you have 3 different swim lanes that you want to think about. You have the design component, and this goes to addressing the market risk. This is typically a UX person that can do some lightweight prototyping and that can also interview users in a very fast, efficient way, because as you can see, we have just 4 weeks. You have a workshopping swim lane. So this is typically owned by a workshopper that's facilitating a lot of the workshops, which is absolutely key. Effective workshopping is the reason why I have it as a key principle here is because it's so important. In order for you to go this fast, you need a really good facilitator, you need a really good workshopping approach and concept. So this is really, really important. And then the third part, of course, is our data science. I mean, you can't do AI and ML without data scientists. Typically, I like a full stack data scientist here. Sometimes you'll need some folks that are more specialized. You'll need a data scientist that maybe can do some business analysis type of work coupled with a machine learning engineer. That's okay too, but typically it's one full stack data scientist that works here. And so you have those 3 swim lanes, and then we do this over the course of 4 weeks. Week 1, 2, 3, and 4. Week 1 is about preparation, gathering the data. Data actually should probably start, I'd say, 4 weeks before you kick this off, because it's always a pain to get data from clients and from people and to clean it. So I would say give yourself a couple of extra weeks there. But week 1 is about preparation, identifying the user, talking to stakeholders, interviewing them, and asking them about what they want to get out of the process, what their ultimate goals are. Identifying a key decider, who is the ultimate owner of this output. If we have disagreements in the workshop, who's going to be the person that's going to say, no, this is the route that we're going to go, and then continue to move forward. So that's what you want to cover in the prep. Week 2 is about aligning on, the map of the overall problem space. So we want to think about the user, their journey, the different steps along that journey, and the other supporting casts that come into play there. So oftentimes you'll have like a service person, for example. You'll have a person that fields calls. You have a person that actually repairs things. There are different roles that come into play when we're thinking about the overall user. You want to map all of that out, and then we want to appropriately identify the key problem that we have and how it links to the data that we have and the types of techniques that we can use, and make sure that everybody has a clear understanding of what that looks like. And then we want to select the actual problem that we're going to be solving, and we want to say, hey, for this particular user, we think that we can develop a series of predictive maintenance alerts at this particular interval, and we think that's going to be valuable. And if we're able to prove that out at the end of this 4-week process, that's going to be great. So that's week 2. There's some more that goes into that, but that's kind of the general synopsis of week 2. And then week 3 is all about taking what we learned in week 2 and putting it into action. We're building prototypes, we're interviewing people, we're doing EDA, we're training algorithms, we're sitting closely with the client to make sure that we understand the data, and we're trying to solve for whatever bogey we've set for ourselves in week 2. So week 3 tends to be a little bit more downsized to the technical people than design people, and that's just us kind of going at it and trying to build the right solutions for the goal that we're trying to solve. And then week 4 is about packaging and delivering everything and making sure that we're providing a really good synopsis of the work that we've done for our client. And also we're handing over code, and we're handing over the interviews. It's just like a whole package deal that we're doing. So that's the AI design sprint in summary. At the end of this, there's a ton that you're going to get there. I mean, there are kind of intangibles that I think are really helpful, like people understanding their business for the first time. Like, I oftentimes have gotten this comment that, like, Manny, I've been working here for 3 years, and I did not appreciate how complex our system was, and I didn't appreciate all the different players and the different components, and we were able to discover that in week 2. So there are a bunch of intangibles like that, but the 2 main tangible items that come out of this that I've seen a ton of value for clients and for internal teams in my past history have been the 2 prototypes. So one is the prototypes for users, so actually showing what that is going to look for, and you're able to do this in 2 weeks. It doesn't have to be fancy, but it can communicate a lot of valuable information. And what goes with this are user interviews. So we're actually getting random testers. We're interviewing them, and we're saying, hey, you're a dental hygienist, for example. We just developed this app for you. Can you walk through this? Does it make sense? And we have those recordings, and that is super valuable information for the company, whoever we're working with. That direct client feedback, it's really helpful. And it happens oftentimes that the problem that you thought you were going to solve at the beginning of the sprint is actually not the problem that we ended up solving, because we've gone through this process. And oh my gosh, does that save you a ton of heartache. So this is key tangible thing that comes out of this, is that user prototype. The second one here is the functional prototype, the data science work, and that's just great because it's actual working code. It's got the minimal viable model, but it shows you all the different components. It's walking through everything. It's well documented. You've typically thought about how you might improve it. You have kind of a roadmap in terms of how you would beef up certain parts of the overall solution, the back end, whatever model training you're doing, the servicing, things like that. So clients really like this, the functional prototype. I'd say that this helps you build a ton of credibility and goodwill with the business folks, with the PMs, with the voice of the customer types of individuals. So this goes a long way there. And then this goes a long way in building credibility with your technical folks. So your data engineers, your data scientists, your data science managers. And so that's why I really like these 2 coming out of the AI design sprint. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. I wanted to provide a little bit more context on this graphic that's getting a lot of interest on LinkedIn. If you want to learn more about the AI design sprint, there is a short survey that you're going to see below this video. If you do me a favor and fill that out, I'm really interested in learning about what people have questions on, what has been their experience, and what would be valuable to you, AI innovators, as you're trying to help companies go from 0 to 1 here. So please fill that out. And if you have any questions about this, feel free to ping me. You can email me. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm really excited about where we are with AI and machine learning technologies. It feels like it can either go one of two routes, either the AI winter route, which we've seen in the past, or the AI summer route, which I'm hoping is going to be the case. And I think it's going to be up to folks like you, like me, and folks in our community to make that happen. And I hope that having these conversations and providing these types of framework is helpful in us doing that. All right. Thank you, everybody, and talk to you soon. Goodbye.